History often feels like it's written in, big headlines, presidents signing things, generals winning battles, revolutions happening right out in the open.
Yeah, the visible stuff.
But what if some of the really pivotal moments, the actual turning points, happened more quietly, in whispers and secrets? A kind of hidden war fought with information.
That's a great way to put it, because leaders always need to communicate, obviously, with their own side.
Sure, effectively.
But there's always been this other equally vital need,
Mm.
keeping critical information locked down, secret, away from the enemy.
And this isn't just like a modern spy movie thing, is it? The ancient wisdom really drives this point home.
Oh, definitely.
There's that incredible line from the Yi Jing, basically warning about how crucial secrecy is. It says something like, if the ruler is not secret, he loses his minister.
If the minister is not secret, he loses himself.
If a matter is not secret, harm will be done. It's pretty stark.
And Sun Tzu, in The Art of War, he's even more direct about it, linking secrecy right to intelligence.
Right.
He says something like, among the forces, none are closer than spies. In affairs, none are more secret than spying. He's saying understanding the enemy is key, but protecting your own stuff, that's survival.
So this hidden world, this undercurrent of secret messages and codes, has been running alongside everything else forever.
Mm-hmm.
And today, our deep dive is inspired by a really fantastic source that tracks this whole journey, the Codebook. It argues that this constant battle encoding versus decoding wasn't just a sideshow. It actually shaped events.
Yeah, profoundly. Sometimes it was like history's punctuation mark, deciding who won, who lost, who even got to stay in the game.
So our mission today is to unpack the key ideas from this book, guide you through how cryptography evolved, and show how the secret war has, really influenced the world we live in now, often in ways you might not even think about.
And the material lays out this long history really nicely, breaking it into 3 big phases.
Right, the manual age, the mechanical age, and what it calls the smart age.
Let's dive into that journey together.
Okay, so starting way back, the first efforts weren't even really about scrambling the message content, were they?
No, not really. The main idea was much simpler. Just hide the message. It was all about concealment, making sure the enemy wouldn't even realize a message existed.
It was about the hiding before they got to the actual coding.
Exactly. And the book gives some pretty wild examples of this early stuff. Steganography, it's called. Concealed writing.
Let that story from ancient Greece, maybe 5th century BC, during the wars with Persia.
You're writing on a wooden tablet.
And then just covering it all up with wax so it looks blank.
Right. Unless you knew to scrape the wax off, you'd never see it. Simple, but kind of brilliant if the enemy isn't expecting it.
And apparently the Greeks had an even more, let's say, extreme method.
Oh, the messenger's head. Yes. Shave the head, tattoo, or write the message on the scalp.
Wait for the hair to grow back.
Send him off, and then shave his head again at the other end to read it. That's commitment.
Serious dedication to secrecy. And this basic idea, just hiding the message, it actually still pops up, doesn't it?
Surprisingly, yes. The book mentions modern spy stuff, like invisible ink, or messages hidden in objects, even tiny capsules swallowed by agents. It can work if nobody's looking too hard or they don't know what to look for.
But that's the basic flaw, right? It's like hide and seek.
Pretty much.
If your enemy is thorough, they'll probably find it eventually, find the traces.
Exactly. And realizing that limitation, that just hiding it isn't foolproof, that's what led to the next big idea.
Which was, what if the enemy does find the message? They're holding it right there.
But they still can't understand a single word of it.
And that question, that's the birth of cryptography. The actual art of secret writing, messing with the message itself.
Right. So in the manual age, when everything was done by hand, the methods mostly fell into 2 main camps based on what they did to the original text: transposition and substitution.
Okay, transposition, that's rearranging the letters, right? Mixing them up.
Yeah, scrambling the order. The Caesar cipher is the classic simple example. You just shift every letter a fixed number of places down the alphabet.
Like A becomes B, or maybe A becomes D if you shift by 3?
Exactly. So a word like, say, hello might become K-H-U-R if you shift by 3. Looks like nonsense if you don't know the shift number. Julius Caesar supposedly used it.
And a substitution, that's different.
Yeah, instead of just shifting, you replace each letter with a different specific letter based on some pre-agreed, maybe arbitrary pairing.
So you might decide A is always replaced by Q, B by X, C by J, and so on. You create a whole secret alphabet.
Precisely. It feels more random, maybe harder to guess at first, because it's not just a simple sequence shift.
Okay, so rearrange or replace. But the book points out a really big problem with both of these simple methods, as long as you use just one system for the whole message.
Yes, a fatal flaw, really. And it comes down to the patterns within language itself. It's called frequency analysis.
Ah, right. We don't use all letters equally often?
Exactly. In English, letters like E, T, A, O, I, N are super common, way more common than, say, J, Q, X, or Z.
So if you get a long coded message using just one substitution cipher, you just count up which coded symbol shows up the most. And that's probably your substitute for E. The next most common is probably T, and so on down the line.
You got it. That statistical fingerprint of the language shines right through this simple cipher. It lets you break the code even if you don't know the original substitution rule.
So that weakness pushed people to find something better.
Definitely. Which leads us to things like the Vigenere cipher.
Developed by a French diplomat, apparently.
That's right. And the Vigenere was a big step because its main idea was to use multiple different encryption schemes within the same message, not just one fixed rule.
Okay, so the rule changed as you went along. It wasn't just one shift or one substitution alphabet for the whole thing.
Exactly. You'd use a keyword or maybe a sequence of numbers. That's the key. And that key tells you which specific rule, like which shift amount, to apply to each letter of your message, one by one.
Right, so if the key was, say, the word key Y, K10, E4, Y24 in the alphabet, the first letter of your message gets shifted by 10, the second by 4, the third by 24, then the fourth letter gets shifted by 10 again, fifth by 4. You cycle through the key.
Perfect example. So if your message was attack and the key was key Y, A0 plus K10 equals K10, T19 plus E4, X23, T19 plus Y24 is R, wrapping around 19 plus 24, sewing 3, 43, 26, which is R. A0 plus K10, KC2 plus E4 plus Y24. I, 10 plus 24, 34, 34, 26, which is I. You get KXRKGI.
Looks like total gibberish. And to decrypt it, you absolutely need that keyword key Y to know how much to shift each letter back.
Yes, that's the core idea. And it makes frequency analysis way, way harder because the same plaintext letter, like T in attack, gets encrypted to different letters, X and R, depending on its position relative to the key.
Okay, that sounds much more secure. So why didn't everyone just use Vigenere then? What was the catch in the manual age?
The catch was practicality.
Yeah.
It was much more secure, yes, but doing it by hand was slow, really slow, and easy to make mistakes. Plus, for long messages, you ideally wanted a long, non-repeating key. But then you have the problem of how do you securely get that long key to the person receiving the message?
Right, the key distribution problem.
Exactly. And just the sheer effort of looking up and applying maybe 26 different shift rules, letter by letter, it was just too cumbersome for widespread military use back then. The complexity was there, but the ability to manage it reliably by hand wasn't.
Which kind of perfectly sets the stage for the next big shift, the mechanical age, around the 20th century.
Absolutely. This is where technology starts to catch up with the theory. Modern warfare needed faster, more reliable, and much stronger encryption. Machines could handle the complex calculations that were just too much for humans.
And you also had new vulnerabilities like radio transmissions.
Big time. Suddenly, your messages weren't just physically carried, they were broadcast wirelessly. Anyone could potentially intercept them. That meant you needed encryption strong enough to withstand enemy analysis, even if they captured the raw signal.
It puts that saying in perspective. If World War I was the chemists' war with poison gas,
And World War II, the physicists' war, with the atomic bomb.
then World War II was also, in a huge way, the mathematicians' war. Controlling information through codes was absolutely critical.
Couldn't agree more. And the icon of this mechanical age, the machine everyone thinks of, has got to be Enigma.
The German Enigma machine? Yeah. The book describes it as this fascinating mix of mechanical and electrical parts.
Like a typewriter, kind of, with a keyboard.
Yeah.
But inside, all these wires and rotating wheels, rotors, and a display where lights show the encrypted letter.
And its big significance wasn't just that it was complicated, but that it was the first encryption machine to be mass-produced. It really signaled that shift from manual methods to automated machines for serious code work.
And the real heart of Enigma, the clever bit, was that rotor mechanism, these wire disks.
Yeah.
Every time you pressed a key on the keyboard, one or more of the rotors would click around to a new position.
Changing the electrical path inside the machine.
Exactly. So the substitution rule, the specific way letters were scrambled, changed with every single keystroke. It was basically automating the Vigenere concept, multiple schemes, but on a scale and with a speed that was impossible by hand.
And the complexity just ballooned, didn't it? Early versions were simpler, but the German military models.
Yeah, they ended up with multiple rotors they could choose from and arrange in different orders, plus plugboard settings. It resulted in just a staggering number of possible starting configurations, over 200 billion possible ways to set the machine up each day.
The book uses that amazing analogy. Typing the entire Oxford English Dictionary 300 times over wouldn't even cover all the possible Enigma settings.
It really drives home the scale, just sheer combinatorial explosion.
So, on paper, with that level of complexity changing constantly, it really should have been unbreakable by any standard method back then, right? Trying to brute force 200 billion keys, forget it.
Theoretically, yes. It looked impregnable. But the story of how Enigma was broken is maybe one of the greatest stories in cryptography. It shows how even amazing tech can be beaten by human insight, teamwork, and eventually some clever mechanization on the code-breaking side, too.
It started with intelligence gathering, getting hands on the machines themselves and the operating manuals. Poland played a huge early role there.
Crucial early work, yes. But even having the machine wasn't enough. You still had to figure out which of those billions of settings the Germans were using on any given day.
Which led to that massive effort at Bletchley Park in the UK.
Right, this incredible gathering of minds, not just mathematicians like the famous Alan Turing, but linguists, chess champions, crossword puzzle experts. Thousands of people, about 7,000 eventually, working relentlessly on intercepted German messages.
And Turing, often called the father of theoretical computer science, he had some key insights, didn't he?
He did. He and others realized that even with a machine as complex as Enigma, real-world communication is rarely perfectly random. Humans fall into patterns. Well, things like stereotyped message openings or closings. Maybe predictable reports sent at the same time each day, like weather forecasts Wetterbericht. Or even operators using lazy settings or repeating certain phrases.
Like Heil Hitler at the end of messages.
Exactly. If you could make a good guess, a crib about a piece of plain text that likely corresponded to a piece of ciphertext you'd intercepted.
That gave you a wedge, a way in to start figuring out the machine's settings for that short stretch.
Precisely. They also exploited the mechanical properties, like the way the rotor stepped forward predictably, and a crucial design choice the Germans made. An Enigma machine could never encrypt a letter as itself. A could never become A, B never B.
That seems like a small detail, but it helped narrow things down.
Significantly. It eliminated possibilities. So these weren't flaws in the cryptographic theory of Enigma, but weaknesses in how it was used and implemented. Human factors and mechanical details.
And all this analysis, combining the cribs with the mechanical knowledge, allowed the Bletchley Park team to cut down the number of possibilities they had to check.
Dramatically. They reduced the search space from those hundreds of billions down to something more manageable, maybe around 1.05 million potential daily keys.
Okay, a million is better than billions, but still way too many to check by hand every day, especially under wartime pressure.
Absolutely impossible manually. And this is where Turing's other genius contribution comes in. He designed electromechanical machines called bombs.
Not bombs like explosives, but named after the Polish bomba kryptologiczna.
Right. These bombs were essentially specialized early computing devices. Their specific job was to rapidly test thousands of possible Enigma settings against the cribs the analysts had identified. They automated that final search process.
And they built quite a few of them.
They ended up building around 210 bombs by the end of the war, based on Turing's design. He even wrote directly to Churchill to get the resources fast-tracked.
And the impact?
Huge. The bombs often allowed Bletchley Park to find the Germans' daily Enigma key within hours. This gave the Allies incredibly valuable, timely intelligence, particularly in the Battle of the Atlantic against the U-boats, and it arguably shortened the war significantly.
Wow. And while that was happening in Europe, the U.S. was having its own code-breaking successes in the Pacific theater against Japan, right? Cracking their purple cipher machine.
Yes, the Purple Machine was Japan's high-level diplomatic cipher, similar in concept to Enigma, though built differently. The U.S. Army's Signal Intelligence Service, led by William Friedman, achieved a major breakthrough there.
And the source highlights some key moments where breaking purple made a difference. Midway.
The Battle of Midway is the classic example, June 1942. U.S. codebreakers deciphered messages detailing the Japanese plan, including a feint towards Alaska, meant to draw the U.S. fleet away from the real target, Midway Atoll.
So the U.S. knew the real plan.
They did. Admiral Nimitz could position his carriers perfectly, turning Japan's planned surprise attack into a catastrophic ambush for the Japanese Navy. Nimitz himself apparently called it a victory of intelligence.
And there was also the interception that led to Admiral Yamamoto being shot down?
Yes, later in the war. Breaking a message detailing the flight itinerary of Admiral Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor, allowed U.S. fighters to intercept and shoot down his plane, a massive blow to Japanese morale and strategic planning.
So incredible feats of cryptanalysis, breaking these complex machines. But the U.S. also used a completely different, almost opposite approach in the Pacific too, didn't
They
they?
did. And it's one of the most remarkable stories from the source,
Yeah.
the Navajo Code Talkers.
Right. The U.S. knew the Japanese were working hard to break their codes too.
And their existing codes were potentially vulnerable. The idea came from an engineer, Philip Johnston. He wasn't Navajo himself, but he'd grown up on the Navajo Nation reservation and spoke the language fluently.
And he realized just how incredibly complex Navajo was.
And crucially, how unknown it was to the outside world. It's a very complex language, tonal, with grammar completely unrelated to European or Asian languages. And importantly, it was an A-written language at that time.
So he suggested using Navajo speakers as battlefield communicators, speaking their language over the radio.
Exactly. They did a demonstration for Marine Corps officers. 2 Navajo speakers transmitted and translated 6 standard military messages back and forth perfectly. The speed and accuracy were impressive.
But the real test was security. Could the Japanese break it?
That was the key question. They recorded the Navajo transmissions and gave them to the Navy's top cryptanalysts, the same guys who had cracked Purple. After weeks of trying, these expert code breakers were totally stumped. They apparently reported back that it just sounded like a series of strange gurgling noises, completely unintelligible.
Why Navajo specifically? The book makes a point about this.
Yes, this is fascinating. Before the war, German anthropologists had actually studied several other Native American languages. So there was a risk Germany or Japan might have access to linguists familiar with those. But Navajo, almost no non-Navajo people understood it. And crucially, no known foreign anthropologist had studied it in depth. It was linguistically isolated.
A perfect natural code, hidden in plain sight because nobody outside the community could understand it.
Exactly. They started by recruiting an initial group of 29 Navajo men. They did have to develop a specialized vocabulary for military terms that didn't exist in Navajo.
Like using bird names for planes.
Yeah, owl for a reconnaissance plane, sparrowhawk for a dive bomber, fish names for ships, whale for battleship, shark for destroyer. Very creative substitutions.
And what about spelling out names or places that weren't in the codebook?
They developed an alphabet system, assigning Navajo words to English letters. But here's another clever part. To defeat frequency analysis for really common letters like E, they assigned multiple different Navajo code words.
So E could be transmitted using different Navajo words each time.
Yeah, maybe ant one time, elk another time, I another. It completely scrambled any potential letter frequency patterns.
Incredible. And the result?
Over 400 Navajo men eventually served as code talkers. Their code, transmitted openly over radios in the heat of battle, was never broken by the Japanese. It's considered one of the few truly secure codes in modern warfare history.
A really powerful story. They even have a National Navajo Code Talkers Day now, August 14th.
And rightly so. It shows that sometimes the most effective solution isn't the most technologically complex one.
Okay, so we've gone from hiding messages to manual ciphers to these amazing mechanical machines like Enigma, and then this completely different approach with the Navajo language. Where does the story go next?
That takes us into the third era outlined in the source. The smart age, or the intelligent age, driven, of course, by the computer revolution.
Right, and computers brought both sort of quantitative and qualitative leaps, didn't they?
Absolutely. Quantitatively, it's easy to see. Computers can simulate any mechanical cipher, like Enigma, but push it to extremes.
No physical limits.
Exactly. Instead of 8 rotors, simulate 100. Instead of 26 settings per rotor, simulate 50 or 100. The number of possible keys becomes astronomically larger than even Enigma's billions.
And you can simulate things machines couldn't actually do.
Yes, simulate rotors spinning backward or speeding up randomly or disappearing entirely. You can create encryption rules far more complex than any physical machine could manage. And, of course, computers are incredibly fast.
But the book really stresses the qualitative changes computers brought. What's the first big one?
Digitization. This is fundamental. Information isn't just letters anymore. It's converted into streams of zeros and ones. Binary code.
Like the ASCII code for letters.
Exactly. Where A might be represented by the binary sequence 110001, Encryption now happens at the level of these individual bits.
So you're not just substituting A for Q, you're manipulating the zeros and ones representing A.
Precisely. You could encrypt only the first few bits, or maybe flip every third bit, or perform complex mathematical operations on blocks of bits. This completely shatters the underlying linguistic structure letter frequencies, common words that code breakers relied on for centuries. Digitization changed the whole game.
Okay, that's a huge shift. And the second major qualitative leap, the book calls it maybe the biggest disruption of all.
Public key cryptography. This is where things get really interesting and maybe a bit counterintuitive. The idea that the encryption process itself, the way you lock the message, can be made completely public.
Wait, public? But wasn't secrecy always about keeping the method secret, like the Germans guarding Enigma's wiring?
Historically, yes. Security depended on keeping the algorithm or the machine or the key hidden. Public key flips that script.
How does that even work? The book uses an analogy, right?
Yeah, the lock and key analogy. Imagine you create a special kind of padlock. You can make millions of copies of this open padlock and give one to anybody who might want to send you a secret message.
Okay, so everyone has my open padlock.
Right. They can put their message in a box, snap your padlock shut on it, and send the locked box to you. Anyone can examine the padlock you gave out. Its mechanism is totally public knowledge. But only you possess the unique secret key that can open that specific type of padlock. And here's the magic. Even though the padlock's design is public, it's computationally impossible for someone to figure out how to make your secret key just by setting the padlock.
Wow. Okay. So the locking mechanism is public, but the unlocking key is private and can't be derived from the lock.
That's the essence of it. And the mathematical foundation for this relies on a specific property of numbers.
Prime numbers.
Prime factorization, yes. Remember, prime numbers only divisible by 1 in themselves, like 17 or 31.
Right.
Now, it's really easy to multiply two large prime numbers together. Say, 17 times 31 equals 527. Simple multiplication. But if I just give you the number 527 and ask you, what two prime numbers did I multiply to get this?
Yeah.
Finding those factors, 17 and 31, is much, much harder, especially when the primes are hundreds of digits long. You basically have to resort to trial and error.
Oh, I see. So the big number, the product, 527, that's like the public padlock.
Exactly. And the two original prime factors, 17 and 31, are the secret key. It's easy to create the lock, multiply the primes, but incredibly hard to find the key, factor the large number, just by looking at the lock.
And this is the principle behind the RSA algorithm.
Precisely. Named after its inventors Revest, Shamir, and Adelman. They developed one of the first practical and widely adopted public key crypto systems based on this difficulty of factoring large numbers.
And the numbers they use are way bigger than 527.
Oh, vastly bigger. The security relies on the fact that the difficulty of factoring increases exponentially as the numbers get larger.
The book mentions that challenge they issued back in 1977.
Yeah, classic story. They published their algorithm, an encrypted message, and the public key, which was a 129-digit number that was the product of two large primes. They offered $100 to whoever could factor it and break the code.
And someone eventually did it.
They did, but it took 17 years.
17 years.
And a massive collaborative effort involving hundreds of researchers and distributed computing power across the internet. As the book rightly points out, intelligence that's 17 years old is completely useless in any real conflict or timely situation.
And today, the RSA numbers used are much longer, over 300 digits sometimes.
Often, yes. The estimates suggest that factoring one of these modern large RSA keys, even using all the computing power currently available on Earth working together, could take hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of years.
So for all practical purposes, it's considered secure.
Extremely reliable for now, yes. And this RSA system, or systems based on similar hard problems in mathematics, is what underpins so much of our secure digital world today.
Online banking, secure websites, HTTPS, mobile payments.
All rely on public key cryptography, very likely RSA or similar algorithms. That mathematical difficulty is literally protecting our financial transactions and private data every single day.
It's amazing. We've traced this line from literally writing on someone's scalp.
Through simple letter shifts, complex whirring rotors and machines.
To cracking those machines with brain power and early computers using obscure languages.
And finally landing here, in an age where the encryption method can be totally public, because the security hinges entirely on the mind-bending difficulty of a specific mathematical problem.
It really highlights that core idea from the source, This continuous war, this arms race between hiding information and uncovering it, it just keeps evolving through history.
It's a constant theme, adapting to whatever technology and knowledge is available at the time.
And it really brings it home that this isn't just some abstract historical curiosity. The results of these code battles literally shaped the outcome of wars, the map of the world we live in. And the technology born from this struggle, like RSA, is now woven into the fabric of our everyday digital lives. It's securing our information right now.
It connects directly back to us.
So, thinking about this whole incredible journey, from needing to hide the method of secrecy, to hiding the message, to complex machines, and now to openly publishing the lock and relying purely on mathematical hardness to protect the key. If math itself is the current fortress wall, what do you think the next fundamental shift in this code war might look like? Where does this ongoing battle move next? What's the future battlefield for secrecy?